Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to everybody participating today across the UK and internationally. I'm Nick Pidgeon from Cardiff University, School of Psychology, and I'll be chairing today's proceedings. We're here to launch the new ESRC-funded initiative, Behavioural Research UK, an exciting new capability for the social scientists, both in the UK and elsewhere. We were absolutely thrilled to see well over 1,000 event registrations for this meeting, spanning academia, government, the third sector and business. I think that reflects the fact that behavioural science in its various forms has been a part of the UK research frontier for many years, but it's often been fragmented in both theory and method. This initiative aims to put that situation right. Also, high-quality behavioural research is of critical policy and economic importance in the global and current world. It was the former UK chief scientist, Sir David King, who observed about 20 years ago that science sat at the heart of every activity across government and society, and hence he set up the network of chief scientific advisors in all UK government departments. But it's also become clear now that for many of our major challenges, think about achieving net zero, protecting nature, human health, organizational and societal resilience, likewise, human behavior is also critical. For example, we've just witnessed a major pandemic which hit the globe and our country. And that was not just a viral issue, it was a behavioral problem as well. So the BI UK Hub aims to provide capabilities to address some of the grand challenges that people, problems and human behavior set us in society. So moving on next to housekeeping. Today we will be in two sections, an opening address from Dame Angela McLean and then comments from the Economic and Social Research Council and Professor Linda Bauld, who is the co-investigator or the co-principal investigator for BR UK. After that, we'll have a brief period of question and answer, primarily for Dame Angela and Joy Todd from ESRC, and then we'll move on to some more detail of what the Research Hub will be doing and some of its activities, and again at 11 o'clock, a further question and answer with a prompt close at 11:30 next. In terms of housekeeping, you're not able to, those of you who are watching on the YouTube channel, you're not able to put questions through the YouTube chat, which has been disabled, but you can do this on the Slido package, which we see here on the screen. Now, the link to that is either on the email that you were sent previously. There was alongside the YouTube button, a Slido button, so press that, which should take you there. Or go to www.slido.com and ask your questions through that means. The code to use is hashtag BRUK. That's hashtag BRUK. On there, you can upvote questions. And we would ask you as well, if a question is presented to a particular speaker, could you note in the question who the question is for? Given the number of participants, we're pretty sure we're not going to get around to answer all of the questions, but we do endeavour, we will respond in the future on the BI UK website. We'll have a list of the questions that were posed today and the responses from various members of the team. You should also note that this event is being recorded next. So I think without further ado, I would like to give a really warm welcome. It's fabulous that we've got Dame Angela McLean here to speak briefly on the role of behavioural science in government and the importance of this initiative. She is the UK Chief Government Scientific Advisor. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you very much, Nick. And good morning to everybody. I'm very glad to join you here this morning at the launch of Behavioural Research UK. So like many initiatives, this ambitious programme from ESRC has been developed in the wake of the pandemic that we've just all experienced. As some of you may know that during COVID, I was co-chair of something called SPI-M, which was a modelling subgroup for the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, which is better known as SAGE. Epidemic modelling is very hungry for data about human behaviour, and we were very glad to have frequent survey data on age-specific contact patterns, that allowed us to ground model assumptions in relevant and up-to-date data. And we were also very lucky to have members of SPI-B, so as SPI-M was for modelling, SPI-B was for behavioural science, a subgroup of SAGE. Members of SPI-B would come along to SPI-M and share with us the work they were doing on behavioural science relevant to the advice SAGE was giving. So this is a great opportunity for me to thank members of SPI-B who are here today for their constructive contributions to SAGE work. The COVID inquiry is now well underway, and it's not for me to prejudge its conclusions, but I think it's reasonable to guess that as one of many scientists active during the pandemic, there were knowledge and evidence gaps which affected the advice we were able to give. So since COVID, I've moved from being Chief Scientific Advisor in the Ministry of Defence, that was my job then, to Government Chief Scientific Advisor. And that means that if an emergency were to happen, I would be chairing SAGE. So it's very much in my interests for SAGE and for government as a whole to be in a better position to ask for, receive, absorb, and apply robust social and behavioural science advice that is grounded in relevant and timely evidence. Understanding societal impacts and behaviours doesn't just matter for emergency preparedness and response, but you'll understand, I'm sure, why I'm emphasising its importance in this particular context, because the pandemic can and should be a turning point for us all. And it's a major reason why I welcome the development of BRUK and why the Government Office for Science is a participant in the programme. For that same reason, I have a team in Go Science already leading cross-government work on tackling social and behavioural knowledge and evidence gaps to improve emergency preparedness. And that work is currently being led by my wonderful colleague Sarah Sharples, the Chief Scientific Advisor in the Department for Transport. But let's move beyond science for emergencies, because I'm keen to illustrate, from my perspective at least, why it is so relevant to bring more social and behavioural research and insights to bear on policymaking. Since I assumed the role of GCSA almost a year ago, AI has probably been the most prominent single issue on which my advice has been sought. I think the UK can be proud of its leadership in exploring the future of AI, particularly in last November's Safety Summit, and I'm pleased that South Korea this spring and then France in the autumn will be hosting further summits on safety. But I do think that more work, much more work, is required to think through the societal ramifications of AI, starting with understanding and evaluating applications that we are already using. And actually, there's a broader point here, neatly captured in a recent report by the British Academy and the Academy of Social Sciences. That report was called The Shape of Research Impact. So I want to share an anonymous quote that gets its own page at the start of the report. It goes like this: "Engineering and medicine are the handmaidens to society. They provide solutions, but they can only be solutions if they're adopted by society." It goes on, "Technology isn't the solution. Technology can be used, but it can only be used by society, which is made out of individual humans." And I think this statement rather neatly explains the value of adopting socio-technical thinking in relation to emerging issues like AI. So it's already clear to me that the multidisciplinary approach promised by BRUK is the right way forward. That same SHAPE report concluded that the social sciences and humanities are often important to processes by which companies, governments, and societies adopt and integrate technologies for the good of society. Who knew, eh? Another recent report by the Academy of Social Sciences reminds us both of the strength and breadth of social science research in the UK, but also, and this is recognised less often, that research which integrates both STEM and social science disciplines tends to be more useful to policymakers. I think such research is more likely to embrace whole systems thinking. It can enable smarter and more responsible innovation. In short, it's what we need to tackle the scale of challenges such as climate change and antimicrobial resistance that we are all familiar with. So coming back to BRUK, I welcome the fact that it is seeking to make behavioural research more useful and usable for the private sector, as well as for those of us working in government, that it's seeking to conduct participatory research and to better demonstrate the impacts of behavioural research on policy and on practice. I'm glad that in and of itself BR UK is a diverse consortium, including universities and government agencies across the 4 nations of the UK, and that sitting alongside is a doctoral training centre that will produce a cohort of graduates schooled in applied behavioural research. So let me end by wishing you all every success. I will be following your endeavours with very great interest indeed. And with that, Nick, I hand back to you.
Thank you, Angela. And we'll move on to the next speaker before we take questions. It's Todd, who's the Deputy Director of Research at the Economic and Social Research Council, the main funders who are representing also UKRI. Joy.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Nick, for the introduction. I'm delighted to have been asked to speak today at what is the beginning of a very exciting journey. For us at ESRC, the journey actually started several years ago as we began to talk to numerous stakeholders about what an investment in behavioural research should look like. And I'm going to introduce the vision that we developed now. Next slide, please. As Dame Angela has set out so clearly, understanding human behaviour is fundamental to how we respond to major global challenges, brought to even greater attention during the pandemic. And we wanted to be able to respond to the increasing interest in behavioural research from government, business and the third sector. Our vision was for a national capability for behavioural research, much like technology and infrastructure capabilities developed by other areas of science. We saw an opportunity to harness the strength of a greater diversity of social science disciplines, as well as opportunities to take advantage of scientific and technological advances such as data science and new methods. Importantly, we wanted an approach that goes beyond individual approaches to behaviour change and includes research to answer fundamental questions about how and why people, organisations and groups behave the way they do within wider societal and economic contexts. So the aim of the initiative was to harness, connect and extend the UK's existing capacity and capability in interdisciplinary behavioural research and support mobilisation of research into policy and practice. Our objectives were to facilitate evidence-based decision-making through timely, high-impact and independent research that meets the needs of policymakers, industry and civil society, and to build a critical mass of researchers with the knowledge and skills to transform our understanding of human behaviour. Next slide, please. Importantly, we knew that we were not starting from scratch. There are existing groups that are recognised internationally for their excellence, and we really wanted this investment to build on this, reduce fragmentation, broaden the base of expertise, strengthen relationships, and build partnerships. Partnership working has been designed in from the outset with posts that will be embedded in government departments in order to maximise the connectivity, and I'll say more about these later. Scalability and agility were important to us, which is why we've designed an investment strategy that can grow and respond to new ideas and future opportunities. And fundamentally, our investments will deliver cutting-edge and impactful research, training and capacity building activities. We designed a hub and spoke investment and started by commissioning the hub and the first spoke, a Centre for Doctoral Training Plus, or CDT Plus, and we're very excited by the outcome. Next slide, please. We funded Behavioural Research UK to be the hub of our national capability, and the CDT Plus is known as the Centre for National Training and Research Excellence in Understanding Behaviour, or Centre UB. The focus of today is, of course, BR UK, and Linda will be giving us an overview of the work of BR UK shortly. Centre UB is led by Jessica Woodhams at the University of Birmingham. It will deliver behavioural research training at doctoral, postdoctoral and continuing professional development level. It will fund PhD students who will also do research in practice placements. It will develop a cohort of early career researchers equipped to pursue a career within or outside of academia. And it will also deliver a flexible programme of training and development activities aimed at researchers in government and other sectors. For both BR UK and Centre UB, partnership working is central, and as I mentioned earlier, each will have an embedded post in a government department designed to maximise connectivity and impact. Go Science will host the BR UK post, and the Cabinet Office, through the Government Skills and Curriculum Unit, will host the Centre UB post. And there will be further opportunities for partnership working through both investments, so please do connect with BR UK and Centre UB through the details on screen to follow their journeys and take up the opportunities that they present as we build our national capability. Thank you, Nick. Back to you.
Thank you, Joy. And yes, we'll move on now, and I'll introduce Professor Linda Bauld, who is the Bruce and John Usher Chair in Public Health and BR UK co-director, and she, along with Susan Michie, have been the two prime movers for the proposal and bid and the centre or the hub that's now going ahead.
Thank you very much, Nick. And thanks to everyone who's listening online. I'm going to provide you an overview of what we hope to achieve through BR UK, particularly some of our early work, and really indicate how we want to work with you across the field. And you're going to hear more about that in the second half of the presentations today. Next. So what I'm going to just explain is the kinds of things that we want to achieve in BR UK, our vision. We have 5 years to do this, but we're also thinking beyond that. And what we want to do is work with the community to really progress behavioural research, as Dame Angela has said. And what we've done is we've brought together a team from all 4 nations in the UK. And you can see on this slide the universities that are involved. This is a multidisciplinary team. We've got colleagues from economics, engineering, computer science, many of the social sciences. And we also have colleagues from outside of academia, which I'll touch on in a sector. But we want to be inclusive and collaborative, and also embed the work in communities around the UK. Next. And our other partners come from a range of different sectors. Of course, many of you listening today are working in industry, in government, in the third sector, and in academia, as Nick was saying. So we have co-investigators from the Scottish Government, Public Health Wales, the UK Health Security Agency Transport Research Lab that works with transport companies, and Zinc Limited, which is a company that works in particular with entrepreneurs, with startups and scale-ups. And then you can see our other partners on the other side of the slide, including the Welsh Government and a range of organisations that are listed there. So we're really grateful to them because they bring extra expertise to the hub. Next. So what we are intending to do is set out in a theory of change. Now this slide and the next one are very busy, so I'm just going to highlight some key elements of this, but this will be available on our website. What we do is set out a vision, but also some of the issues that we've identified that Dame Angela touched on. Some of them. It's quite a fragmented field. We need greater coordination. Often the public thinks about behaviour as being at the individual level, but really it's about behaviour in context. And there's also a relational dimension. So maybe there's a hierarchy of evidence where sometimes behavioural research is not valued in the same way. And we also know that many organisations that could benefit from connecting with behavioural research don't necessarily know how to do that or have the capacity within their own teams. So we've set out how we want to achieve change, the inputs that the grant from the ESRC and our wider community is providing to this endeavour. And then we have activities that we've organised into 3 categories with a cross-cutting one. We aim to build capability, working with the Centre for Doctoral Training Plus, as Joy has said. We aim to conduct primary research across a range of disciplines and using innovative and established methods, and also build further capacity around theories, models and frameworks. And we also will focus on knowledge mobilisation. And in doing all of that work, we want to ensure that we embed equality, diversity, inclusion, and intersectionality in that. You'll be hearing from Anne on that later, and co-produce our research with communities. Next. And in the final section of the theory of change, we've just highlighted here some of the outcomes that we hope to achieve by the end of the grant. And importantly, some of the impact that we hope will be realised by working with you beyond that 5-year period. And we also have a series of key planned outputs, some of which I'm just going to mention briefly to give you a sense of what we're focusing on at the moment. Next. So before I move on to some of the things we've been doing in the early months and we're going to be doing in the first year or so of the grant, I want to explain how we're organised. So we're organising our work around how we do things and what we do. And the what are the themes that we've chosen to focus on within the team and with our partners. So environment and sustainability, health and well-being, resilient communities, which in the first instance we're focusing on a greener transport and travel, but also child safety, particularly online. We have expertise in that through collaborators. And finally, working with financial services, with organisations across the UK, looking at markets and the economy. And how we will do it is focused on the work packages. So capability building, data and technology, methods and evidence synthesis, and engagement and involvement. And our governance structure is meant to ensure that we can conduct the work to a high standard and also pursue good ethical standards in research and engage with our partners. So you see we have a directorate and a leadership group, which is made up of the co-investigators. And then we brought together a fairly sizable group of international experts, chaired by Professor Rolf Hertwig from the Max Planck Institute in Germany for our IAB. And we'll also have a UK-based strategic advisory board. And then you'll see at the bottom of the organizational chart some of the groups that will organize key aspects of our work, knowledge mobilization, and also a network group. And you'll be hearing more about the network from Davan Wetton and Ashley Gould in the second half when they present the capability scoping study. Next slide. So in the initial period of our work, here's some of the things that we are focusing on and that we'd like to involve you in. So we've had a period of setup and reporting to the funder. You're going to be hearing about the large capability scoping study, and the findings of that, mapping the field, will help us build a UK-wide network for behavioural research. We recognise there is already considerable expertise and capability across sectors, including in industry, and we want to make sure that there's opportunities for all of us to engage and really progress the field. We're focusing on 5 demonstration projects, and just to tell you briefly a little bit about them, the first one looks at behavioural advice during the pandemic, and barriers and enablers. The second one is interpreting evidence for policy relevant issues and exploring individual variability. The third one looks at behavioural interventions to reduce speed behaviour in car drivers, so focusing on the work of the Transport Research Lab there. And the fourth one is the development of a dynamic ontology-based database and tools that can be used by the field. And finally, we partnered with the OECD to conduct some analysis of a large 9-country environment and individual behaviour survey. Another couple of things I just want to highlight is we're going to be focusing on responsive mode research and an Ask BR UK function, where colleagues, for example, in policy or other organisations can ask us questions and we consider how best to support that. And then focus on our longer term work and work with Centre UB. Next. So just in the final slide here, I want to emphasise that today is our first opportunity to engage with the community formally. And you're going to be hearing more about how you can get involved in our work. Really keen to learn from you. And as Dame Angela said, build the field, not just these ESRC investments, but really harness what we have in the UK already. We want to foster the next generation of researchers and provide leadership so that we can, I think, contribute additional value to the field and help to address some of those societal and economic challenges. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Linda. That's really great. Could I ask the 3 speakers to put their cameras back on again so that we've got them on the screen? We've got questions and answers, and there are a few questions have come in on the Slido, so that's good. I have one for, I think, to start with Dame Angela, if you could give some comments about this. I mean, I think, where do you think the gaps are in behavioural science support and research currently? Or give me an example of one that you personally worry about. And then a question has come in, which we could probably link to that, that somebody has asked, does government recognise research in behaviours and its application is very live? by which I mean, it takes time. I think that's right, and you don't always get the answers to your questions straight away. So the key question was, how do we maintain their confidence as it develops? Their meaning government departments, as we're taking this research agenda forward. How do we build that relationship? I think so.
So back first of all to your initial question, Nick. I think the biggest issue, which you're addressing for yourselves, but I think it's a big issue for all of society, is the question of how can we promote cooperative behaviour between people. I think things we can do, things you can do that would help us to elicit those kinds of behaviours would be a huge step forward. And I don't just mean cooperative behaviour in running, a great big new research consortium. I mean, in general, I was very interested to hear that one of your projects is going to be about speeding. Actually, you could think of sticking to a speed limit is actually a kind of cooperative behaviour. We will agree with it. We're all of us safer if everybody sticks with it. I would say then within government, I think the first issue would be probably the normal one for all science, including behavioural science, and that's having people recognise that it would help them to ask for some behavioural science input. And then to this third issue, the question from Andrew, thank you, Andrew. Yes, I think government does recognise that behavioural science research is live. I think my real response to that, again, this is not particular to behavioural science, is don't forget that whilst you might be most interested in the cutting edge and what's new, policymakers really need to be, first of all, interested in the settled science. So, the stuff that everybody knows, not cutting edge research anymore, but a large part I would ask of your community is don't forget to tell us that, because we wouldn't necessarily know it. And then also, please make sure to distinguish when you're telling us between the bits of your science that you don't think are going to change and the bits of your science that are new and fresh and might change as new results emerge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So there was also a question, I think, there's been one or two questions about the private sector, and I'm not sure whether that's Joy or Linda. Maybe I'll pass it to Joy as an initial thought. We've had questions about the BR UK linking to private sector organisations, and you could comment from the research councils what you want to see there, and maybe from Linda what we feel we should be putting in place to do in that respect. So Joy, why don't you open out on that one?
Yes, thank you, Nick. And as I said in my introduction, I think we'd see BR UK and Centre UB both serving the needs of government, the private sector and the third sector. So private sector needs very much part of the picture. I think there was a question about some of the training provision being open to the private sector, and obviously that's for the Centre for Doctoral Training, Centre UB, to develop their kind of strategy. But we very much see private sector as being in scope and us needing to kind of serve the needs of business as well as other sectors. So Linda, should I pass over to you?
Yes, thanks very much, Nick and Joy. This is really important. Working with industry is going to be key to our work. So we already have 2 companies involved as partners, as I flagged. The capability scoping study that you're going to be hearing about will be open to all, both researchers in industry and elsewhere, and research users. So that's a way for us to look at what the gaps and opportunities are, including in industry. We're very aware that lots of companies actually are quite further ahead in many cases than perhaps academia or government in thinking about these things being agile using technology. So we need to learn from you. The final thing I'd say, which I didn't flag and I should have done, is that we will have a commissioning fund. I think that was on the slide, which will be open for competitive applications, probably for smaller projects, to people not directly involved as part of the hub. So in other words, are not receiving funding from the grant. And that will be launched after the first 18 months of our work. And that will be open across the field for people to really try and progress some new ideas, and that will be open to all types of organizations, researchers within them. Thanks.
Yeah, can I just also, another question has come in about local authorities, which is a slightly different level of analysis, but it's certainly in sustainability, many of the levers around the built environment or sustainable places are very much at local authority level. So a question is asked, local authorities are starting to employ behavioural scientists. I mean, what would be the opportunities to link up with them?
So I think this is really important. So in my government role as Chief Social Policy Advisor, we work a lot in Scotland with COSLA, for example, and Solace, and obviously for colleagues in Northern Ireland and Wales, and at UK level, local governments are key partners. So you can see how for some of our themes, resilient communities, energy and environment and sustainability, I think working with councils is going to be important. Now, behavioural research capacity from my Scottish perspective is quite limited in local government at the moment, but the behavioural issues that they face are vast. So I think partnering on projects is going to be important, and maybe also looking at some of the areas of the country where there's some really innovative work going on in local government and understanding how they progress with challenges. Thanks.
There's also a technical question here. I'm not sure if it's probably for you again, Linda, I apologise. On the full list of government departments that we're working with. I mean, our view is we're going to be working with as many as possible. I think that across the board, isn't it? But I just wonder if we have a list there somewhere.
Yeah, so we're operating in a complex policy environment. I mean, Go Science has huge capacity to be a convener within government, and they're doing that already in behavioural science for emergencies. For example, they've got a very broad group, but there's many other examples. So our partners you'll find on the website. One of the challenges we had with Northern Ireland, where we've got valuable partnerships, is we didn't have a single government partner. We had quite a few separate departments in Northern Ireland. So the website, as it evolves, you'll see the formal partners, but keen to work with others as well.
Thank you. And then another question, which I think again is for ESRC. So Joy, there are quite a lot of other investments, and there's also been a question about, you know, are we replacing other investments both in government or in the research landscape? And what's your view on, what's ESRC's view on the interface between this initiative and other things which might have behavioural research embedded within them, which you've funded obviously over the years and in the future? So what's your view on that, Joy?
There are lots of investments and other parts of the research ecosystem which BRUK will need to connect with and is connected with already. So there are sort of parts of government, sort of the public health infrastructure, which BRUK is connected into. There are other ESRC investments, which I'm sure BRUK will be reaching out to if they're not already, and I know they are making connections already. And as we know, BRUK is developing and building a network, and that function will be able to connect into a lot of different parts of the ecosystem. So another example, and connecting to the local authorities point that's just been made, ESRC's made investment in local policy innovation partnerships, which are building capability at the local level to use evidence. And that's a great example of where connections can be made in order to help build that capability.
Okay, thank you. That's and for Dame Angela, a question came up, but it's suddenly disappeared again. But I think it's quite an important one. There has been a move over the last few years to have much more citizen engagement, I think, in public policy. Science-wise is a good example, of course, that's been going on for a while now. But there have been more examples. So a question was asked over whether BRUK would be part of this process, and how does it fit with emerging government views on how we engage citizens and people with key critical policy questions. Thank you.
I think my answer to that has to be, I hope so, but you better ask Linda if it is going to be. I shan't be running BRUK. I should be very interested in seeing its products and doing our bit in Go Science to make sure that they're seen elsewhere in government. Linda, I'm going to pass that one to you.
Yeah, I mean, we're keen to work with government. It's difficult in a period of constrained resources for government to do all the citizen engagement that it would, but I think open government, which is such an important part of what we do across our 4 nations, and the science of progressing citizen engagement is important. So BRUK wants to assist with that. So work package 4, which I flagged on that slide, is about involvement and engagement. We've got some excellent co-investigators leading that, Professor Oliver Escobar, Anne, who you hear from, and Steve Riker and others, who've done a lot of innovative work in citizens' juries and other ways of engaging the public. So keen to work with government, but not just government on that, and make sure that it informs our research. And again, when you get to the capability scoping section, if colleagues are real experts in behavioural research and community engagement, which there will be across the country, we're keen to hear from you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Linda. And then again, I think I'll pass this to Dame Angela just before she has to go. There's a question about, I sit actually on the Science Advisory Council for the Department of Transport, and previously many years ago on energy and climate change. And one recognises their behavioural insight team sitting within those departments, and the advisors you've got there already often interact with them. But there is a danger that they'll become too, I think, focused or ring-fenced, or so the default is that civil service will say, well, we'll default to our own. So can Go Science help us, I guess, in the team to make sure those connections are made and that we can have good interactions with the different bits of government that we need to? Thank you.
Yes, I saw that question coming up. I was surprised, actually. In all of my experience, having expertise inside government to whom you can go and speak is a really big help, because those scientists inside government know how to operate the rather complicated machine that is the civil service in a way that actually makes it much more likely that this consortium's important work will be heard, understood, and used by government. I think that means there is an onus on both sides to get to know each other. In my experience, both advising government from the outside and also asking for advice from the inside, I've never found that to be difficult. I was a bit surprised by that question, as though there were, do you really think there's some bunch of behavioural scientists inside government who don't want to talk to you?
Yes, I think that was sort of my reaction as well. But I mean, it will be important to make those links, I think, for sure. I think everybody's nodding. I think we are just coming to the end of this session. I don't know if Joy or Linda want to make any final comments on any of the questions that have been coming up so far. But we go on, Linda, do.
Just one thing for me. So some absolutely brilliant questions coming up, Nick. And obviously there's so many here we haven't managed to touch on, although just a reminder, we've got a longer session after the second half. As you flagged, we will get in touch with colleagues. We'll update the website so that we can answer some of these questions and make sure that people know where to come to get them answered if we've not been able to do it today.
Okay. So I think that is the conclusion of the first session. We should thank Dame Angela for her very valuable time, Joy, Todd as well, on behalf of the Economic and Social Research Council. You're welcome to stay and listen to the discussion or to go to your other meetings. But I think we need to now move on to the next speaker. Thank you. So next slide. So it's with great pleasure, I'll introduce Professor Susan Michie, who is also co-director of BRUK. She's director of the UCL Centre for Behaviour Change. I'll pass over to you, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to touch on some issues relevant to advancing science within behavioural research. Next. So the first question is, what is behavioural research? At its heart, it's systematic investigation aimed at producing new knowledge or theoretical understanding about behaviour and how to enable its change. It involves querying and replicating existing knowledge, as well as generating new knowledge. And also, I just want to make the point here that implementation of research evidence is itself dependent on human behaviour, so part of the scope of behavioural research. Next. We have a very broad concept of behaviour. Next. The first point I want to make is that behaviour is complex and part of multiple systems. So from individual, community, systems, organisational, up to population level. Second point is that context is absolutely key to understanding behaviour and the meaning of behaviour. We're looking for explanation of both processes of change, but also variation across people, places, time, etc. A lot of what we require in terms of behaviour to address key global problems and problems facing the UK today are sustainable behaviours. They're not one-off, they're not short-term, they're sustainable. And we need to think about how we scale up our understanding and our applications of behavioural research. And finally on this slide, really importantly, values. Very important that these be explicit throughout all our research. And I just mentioned two here, equity and justice. Next. Research is, in essence, evidence, theory, and methods. So thinking about generating evidence, we're really going to focus on meeting users' needs to make evidence useful and usable. And it was interesting to hear Angela McLean say that the most useful and usable evidence from her experience is that which integrates behavioural and social sciences with technology, engineering, and other sciences. We're also looking at advancing and applying theory. This is absolutely key for accumulating evidence, which is so important for moving our science forward, and also assessing generalizability. To what extent can you generalize from findings in particular places or populations or times to other new scenarios? Next. Just going to say something about advancing and applying methods. So at the heart of what we're going to be doing and providing leadership with is using multiple methods, selecting according to both the research question and also the research context and the context for which application is relevant. Involving many academic disciplines and partnerships with sectors beyond academia, and co-producing with users. These users may be policymakers, planners, practitioners, the general public, and importantly, sharing data amongst researchers. We are absolutely committed to open science. Next. We have many opportunities facing us in behavioural research, and I'm just going to touch on three here. One is measurement. It's so good that we're moving way beyond relying on self-report, what people say about their own or others' behaviours. We can now study behaviour directly in real-world settings in real time. This is so important. We now have emerging methods, sophisticated methods of linking data sets across domains, across these silos and different disciplines. I think Joy Todd mentioned earlier about fragmentation, the importance of overcoming that, bringing different silos together. And ontologies were mentioned earlier, one method of doing this. And then harnessing new technologies, for example, machine learning and artificial intelligence to analyse data. And again, we heard earlier that actually the impact of AI is a whole other area for thinking about in terms of social and behavioural sciences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. So we move on now. I'll introduce the next speaker. Anne Phoenix is Professor of Psychosocial Studies at University College London, and she's going to be talking about behavioural research and society. There you go, Anne.
Thank you very much, Nick. And I want to start by explaining that our vision is to embed community engagement and equalities into our research by building inclusive communities of practice and by taking a proactive approach to equalities, diversities, inclusion and intersectionalities. And you've already heard that mentioned by Linda and also by Susan. So what we want to do is to really give a flavour here of how we're bringing together behavioural research and holistic understandings of society to meet the aims that Linda and Susan have already mentioned. Next. So our vision is to embed community engagement and equalities into our research by building inclusive communities of practice and taking proactive approaches to equalities. As you can see on the slide, we've added intersectionalities to our equalities strategy. And the reason for that is that many organizations are now doing it in recognition, in order to signal that we recognize that everybody belongs at the same time to different social categories, and that we have to take account of that if we are to address equalities, diversities, and inclusion. We start from a perspective that recognizes that these issues are dynamic and that they're iterative. So in other words, we see equalities policies as changing rather than fixed, and as multiple. So we will engage with that multiplicity. Our aim is to widen our own expertise and that of our stakeholders and the public. We'll build capacity through training and engagement skills and sharing best practice on equalities and on diversities. So by communities of practice, I mean people who have a common interest in an issue and who collaborate to share ideas, strategies, and solution. Now, already on Slido, Orla raised the question of whether we'll be engaging with both geographical and communities of identity and interest. And what we are saying is that we will be engaging broadly and with both kinds, so both geographically and to do with identity and interest. Next. Another of the things we seek to do is to advance methodologies. And in this area, we will do that by using participatory methods throughout the research process. Our focus here is to co-produce research with diverse groups. So we will work both with various publics and with stakeholders. We've heard a lot already about different publics and different stakeholders, including private business interests and so on. We will also conduct systematic reviews because we'll always bear in mind that what we're doing is conducting excellent science, gaining thorough understandings of the state of the art. And final slide. So the engagement and equalities processes that underpin our work are to do with engagement, not surprisingly, knowledge mobilization and equalities. We've already started a process of sharing expertise and informing ourselves on the breadth of issues relevant to our work. We aim to ensure that research is conducted in ways that meet the priorities and concerns of diverse communities. So, equalities, diversities, inclusion, and intersectionalities are built into all aspects of our work. We have a cross-cutting equalities group, and beyond the programme, we've established links with other equalities groups on large project teams with a view to combining annual reviews of our equalities policies and practices and being critical of our own practice in order to improve it. So each year, we'll publish an online open access report on equalities that outlines our goals, our progress, and our plans. So in conclusion, our work is characterized by public engagement, stakeholder collaboration, and co-production in research and knowledge mobilization. We aim to increase understanding of the ways in which behavioral research can be socially inclusive, can embrace diversity, and facilitate the participation of underrepresented groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So I'll now introduce our final speakers for this session. Dr. Jo Davan Wetton, Research Fellow at University College London, with a joint presentation with Ashley Gould, who's the Programme Director from the Behavioural Science Unit here in Cardiff at Public Health Wales. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. So Jo and I are going to offer the briefest of introduction to our very early work in this work package around capability scoping and network development. Next, please. So firstly, on our starting position, if you like, and our approach. So the overall aim of this BRUK work package is to connect both researchers and research users, and then to convene and hopefully increase the coordination of behavioural research activity across topic areas and geographies and sectors, as the previous speakers have highlighted. And we want to make that happen through creating and growing a UK-wide behavioural research network to then inform, using knowledge to inform policy and practice. So around the major societal challenges. And our approach is one of this, using the science to enable increased use of the science. And by that, I mean behavioral science, clearly. Yes, a focus on capability. So we are looking at the knowledge and skills in behavioral research in the way that Susan has described for researchers, but also in terms of those research users as well. But in addition to that, we're interested in the differing professional norms and resources across those topics, geographies and sectors on using behavioral science. And then finally, we're interested in the attitudes and beliefs around how behavioral research adds value to the policy process and the impact that we can have. So the approach that we're taking then is to try and understand the ecosystem, build an understanding of the ecosystem in relation to those three dimensions. So we're interested in current practice in research and in application, and the priority gaps for behavioural research UK to focus on. And we're doing that in these, summarised in these three words. So we want to engage as widely as possible, again, across topics, geographies and sectors. And today is the start of that, as Linda has highlighted. So we've got a presence now on multiple channels that we want people to engage with us through. We're going to do it by asking some questions, posing some questions on the current status and the application of behavioural research and behavioural science, and questions around needs that our stakeholders have. And then finally, formulating a response, again, in the way that Linda and Susan have described, to deliver real improvement. Next, please. So the focus that we've got then to underpin that work is in relation to 4 research questions that we're trying to address through this early work. And these are the first 2. So we're interested in answering this question around the fundamentals, around definitions and understanding, and the value attached to behavioural research, and how that varies, again, by both sector and geography to underpin our transdisciplinary learning. Where can we bring this, where can we tackle this fragmentation that Joy mentioned? Our second research question then is thinking about the current and future needs of the different actors across the system, and highlighted there. Next, please. Our third research question is around the landscape of the extant behavioural research activity. So including this range of both issues and enablers that we've got on the slide there. And then our final research question is around thoughts about how we strengthen capability. We're interested in that ask. We want to understand needs and understand what we can do as a behavioural research UK community to address those challenges. Some of them highlighted on that question, but they are not an exhaustive list. So now I'm going to hand over to Jo to take us through some of the approaches and mechanisms that we're using to try and answer these research questions. Thanks, Jo.
Thanks very much, Ashley. So now comes the part where you come in. So before we reach the Q&A, I'd like to tell you about some really important ways that you can get involved with our work to build capability in behavioural research across the UK. Next, please. So firstly, we'll soon be launching a cross-sector nationwide survey to gain the most comprehensive picture we can of who is doing what, where and how. And as Susan has said earlier, we take a broad view of behavioural research. So this survey is not just limited to people whose job title might be behavioural researcher or behavioural scientist. You're invited to take part if you engage with or work on any form of research about human behaviour, whether it's a large or a small part of your role. And this is going to be really important as an opportunity to help us understand in what areas do people want to strengthen capability, what societal issues are already being addressed across different sectors, how representative of society are the people engaging with behavioural research, and where is more and better behavioural research needed, both now and in the future. It's really important that as many people as possible take part, because the findings will be key to shaping BRUK's future work particularly our commissioning fund, which will open from 2025 for competitive applications for project funding. Following the survey, we'll also be holding workshops later this year to get further in-depth input on emerging priorities. Next, please. So here is going to be your call to action. Look out for an email from us containing the survey link, or if you're not on our mailing list, look out for the link on our website and social media. And as soon as you get it, share the invitation with your networks and set aside 20 minutes or so in your diary to tell us a bit about your role and what you want to see from BR UK and from the future of behavioural research. Next, please. In the next steps, the survey is going to help us to create an interactive map of which organisations are doing what behavioural research where in the UK. And as well as organisations, we'll also gather information on existing networks for people who engage with behavioural research. There's already been some questions in the chat about what things BR UK will engage with or may not replace. We're not looking to replace any existing networks with ours, but rather to be the place that coordinates and convenes things and signposts people to the networks that might also exist, which could play a role for them. The map that we produce will be a live interactive resource, both to help understand the strengths and gaps in our landscape, and also to help people find and connect with one another to build collaborations. Next, please. And finally, we'll establish the BR UK network, which will be an inclusive community of practice to connect with us and with each other. And its purpose will be to connect ideas, skills, and resources, and we'll host regular network events. The network will also be an important way of informing and sharing announcements related to the commissioning fund, so do make sure that you engage with us. I hope that today has sparked plenty of ideas and input that you'd like to share with us. And at this point, I'd like to hand back to Nick for the next Q&A session. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joe and Ashley. Yes, so if the speakers can all put their videos on, I'm wondering if Linda should come in as well. Yes. And we've got everybody there. That's great. So we've had a number of interesting questions come in so far, which we've been looking at in the chat. One really for Susan here, I think. There was a question from Lisa Sutherland, which lots of people want answered or a response to. Please, could you talk more about the community? How will this be run and who will it involve?
Thank you, Nick. I think when we say the community, we mean many, many different kinds of communities. So there are communities that are defined by where people live, where people and how people work, people's identities, but also about their interests, the domains that they're interested, the topics. In terms of academics, the communities could be to do with theoretical interest or methodological interest. So we will very much be guided by you, all of the people on and on this call and beyond, as to what your interests are, where you're based, what you see as communities. We've mentioned before about local authorities and private sectors, and this is why we're doing the capability study, to get a better sense of where behavioural research is happening, what people's interests and needs are, and then the community side of this hub will develop organically between those people who are interested in the research, doing the research on the ground, and us. So I hope that gives an indication of how we're thinking about it at this stage. But everything's developing in partnership with the many communities around us.
Okay, thank you. There was also a sort of a technical question. You're from sort of UCL psychology department about the difference between behavioural science and I suppose behaviourist research, which has a long history, but is quite a narrow part of psychology, I think it'd be fair to say. Can you comment on that, Susan?
Sure. Well, within psychology, one can think about psychology being behaviour and thinking and feeling within an environment. And I think it's a question about focus and emphasis, that what's called behavioural research would focus on the behavioural side of that. But that doesn't mean to say that the way people think and people's emotions and the social and material around them aren't incredibly important in understanding behaviour. There's also the issue that you raised about behavioural versus social sciences. We tend to put labels or put things into categories because it makes communication easier in some ways. But we've heard already today about the intersection between behavioural and social sciences, and often people use these together because you can't think about behaviour without understanding the society in which behaviours are embedded. And if you want to understand social processes, they include people, and people's behaviour is a very important part of that.
Yeah, I was wondering if Linda had a comment on this as well. Pete Bailey, who I think is probably Welsh Government, I'd be interested to hear what the group think is distinctive about behavioural science in contrast to the social sciences in general, because you come from a different academic discipline, don't you, Linda?
So my background is, obviously I'm a professor of public health, but my original training is in social policy. I think it is interesting. There's been a debate even within government about how we, whether we're, we have a social research profession, should it be behavioural and social research, etc. I think behavioural science or behavioural research is a subset of the social sciences. So Joy has talked about the wealth of work that ESRC funds. You can see the disciplines on their webpage that they will fund as social scientists. But I think when you apply different disciplinary backgrounds to the study of human behaviour and indeed organisational behaviour within context, that's when you're getting to behavioural science. And that's why the disciplines involved in it are quite broad. So it's a subset of the social sciences. It brings different social science disciplines together to study behaviour and try and devise solutions that can be applied in real world contexts.
Joy, did you have a comment on that? I'm sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I suppose as from the SRC's and RCUK's perspective.
No, not at all. Absolutely fine. So yes, we've actually started using the term behavioural research to define this investment, because we know that there's a huge diversity of social science disciplines and disciplines beyond the social sciences that can be brought to bear on understanding behaviour. So we've been talking about behavioural research. We want to bring in that diversity of disciplines and diversity of voices into understanding behavioural processes.
Okay, thank you. I had a comment. There was a comment which I might just briefly field. Behaviour change in the climate crisis. That's one of the areas, obviously, that we're interested in the research team in our department. And yes, I think the answer to that is yes, although we will be very cognizant of the other investments that particularly SRC have in that area. I think in a way, what we're looking for in the hub is gaps in the research portfolio as well. And I know one that sits there is much more on the climate adaptation side, that as the world heats and it's going to be difficult to keep it below 1.5 degrees, then there are all sorts of questions around climate adaptation. And I do not think behavioural science has been properly brought to bear on that question yet. People are thinking a lot about the mitigation question, how we stop emissions, but not about so much about adaptation. So there's a big agenda there for us, I think. There was also some questions about an interesting ethical question. I'm not sure who would want to field this one, but I'll throw this open to the panelists. Would we, as a hub, advocate against unethical use of behavioural research by business or maybe even by government? Which I thought was an interesting comment from the floor. Who would like to comment on that?
So I don't know if Anne wants to say something about that from her perspective, Nick?
Well, I think one of the important things that Susan already said is that values are going to be absolutely key to what we do, and making those explicit will be important. So clearly, when we do the research, we're thinking about lots of different communities. We're, as again, Susan said, you said, we are thinking about different groups and the intersections between different identities that people have and the possibilities for changing behavior by understanding in a holistic way. So it is possible that somebody could come in and say, I want to use it for this purpose. But I think as a group, as Susan said, we will be quite clear that our research is for the greater good. The point about having this investment is that we're attempting to change things for the better. And so we will make those values explicit and will not be drawn into trying to use the research in ways that we would find reprehensible. And I'm sure Susan would want to add something to that.
I mean, I think Annie said what I would have said. I think the only other thing to add, it says, would we be advocating? I suppose it depends what advocating is. Certainly in our research, we'll ensure that we reach the highest ethical standards, and that is a conversation that we need to have. And again, I say the community with our many partners. So we can, for example, with Open Science, we're going to be having a series of webinars. Open Science is going to be one of those. We also can do some capacity development to really encourage people to think about the values and the ethics of the research they conduct. But also, I think this is a question that needs to be thought about with users, with the whole sort of research translational process, because ethics comes in at every single stage of research, right from the inception, the questions that are asked, right down to the implementation by people on the ground. Really important question. We'll definitely be taking it forward.
Okay, thank you both. Yes, and I would endorse those comments as well, I think, from my perspective. There's a technical question here about how other academic and other teams get involved with the hub's activities. Anonymous put, rather than applications for funding with a pre-established team, are they going to be open approved projects with opportunities for contribution? Now that's an interesting way to think about it. Linda, I see you might have a view on that.
So I think there's a few ways to work with us. So Joe and Ashley have set out the capability scoping study, so that's absolutely key, and I hope that's pretty clear. I think the other thing, just to emphasize, in forming that network, the way we see the network running is that it will be open to opportunities for engagement through webinars, connecting with Centre UB for their training opportunities, opening up the commissioning fund that I mentioned, so network members knowing when that's open, how they can bid. But I think there's broader collaborations here, and I just point to 2 or 3 areas. If you're working in a behavioural topic and you think it would be useful to connect with us in a modest or more advanced way, where you think we could get involved and help, or you want to tell us what you're doing and are there opportunities to exchange ideas, just get in touch with us. Now, you'll see on the last slide, and this is important, there will be a QR code to the website. The website is under development, I would emphasize, but you can see a contact us button on that website. So do get in touch with us. We're open to collaborating on bids, on ideas. 2 other things I would flag as opportunities. The Ask BR UK function, which we're setting up, is a way to pose a question to us, but we may then reach out to you, the field, if we feel there's an area that say, a policy colleague wants to connect with. And then the final thing, we have a rapid response function. And that means when events develop, obviously we heard from Dame Angela about the pandemic, but flooding, all kinds of things that occur. We do have some funding to do flexible bits of research, and we'll be open to doing that with the community. And some of that will be evidence synthesis, but some of it will be primary research. So I think there's quite a few opportunities there.
Okay, thank you. Now, again, this one might be for Ashley and for Joe.
Nick, can I just say that Anne has her digital hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry, Anne. There you are. Go on.
I just wanted to add on a bit to what Linda said, all of which, of course, is crucial. But just to point out again that, as she, one of her slides explained, that we have work package 4, which is very much about engagement. And so not only are people invited to get in touch with us, but that we will be making a lot of efforts to have civic engagement, where we work with different communities, where Oliver Escobar, who leads work package 4, is very experienced in having citizens' juries, mini publics, and so on to work with. And we will be trying to make sure that our agenda are informed by work of that kind. And I think it also fits with the previous question in that it ensures that our ethics build in accountability to different parts of the population and so on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and apologies. It's looking at 2 screens, unfortunately. Yeah. The question, those of us who were involved in science advice on the pandemic came across this issue a lot. A question has been put, anonymous, currently doing a systematic review of behavioural science use in primary care. lots of projects don't make it to publication. Are there plans to collect evidence from private public industry that might not be in the published domain? And I was thinking about Ashley and Joe here, given the capabilities study. But during the pandemic, one of the questions on the science advisory boards we were constantly being asked was, there's lots of stuff being published about this, but it's not peer reviewed. What's its quality? And I think that was a puzzle to many of us as observers, or those involved in the science advisory process. So Joe or Ashley, I've got thoughts on that.
Sure.
Go, Joe.
Over to you, Ashley.
Oh, sounds like Joe's got a fire alarm going off. So yeah, I'll pick it up. Yes, we've had conversations about this very recently, Nick, very much about how we can best collate the kind of evidence that you're talking about that is out with the published literature at the moment. So there's a lot of rich stuff in that grey area that we would want to collect. And adopting, we've had a conversation around a surveillance type approach. So the collection, analysis, and then onward dissemination of that evidence, tools, resources, how we organize that and how we get it back out to the behavioral research community. So we're having conversations in that space that are exactly as your questioner has asked. I think there's something that we've got to look at in terms of the way that Linda's described the hive mind. So that's not too destructive a comment, but adding something and being able to take something back out to get over the fragmentation that Joyce highlighted right at the start.
Thanks, Ashley. And yes, Susan, did you want to comment as well?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that the whole publication process is really changing. And it goes back to what I was saying about open science, that now the trend is to, as soon as a piece of research has been written up to the satisfaction of all the authors and researchers involved, it gets published as a preprint. So it hasn't been peer reviewed, but it's open and it's accessible. And it then is peer reviewed, hopefully in an open, accessible way. And then one knows 2 people have approved these, 3 people have approved these. So for example, Wellcome Open Research is their publishing platform. The papers go up immediately. And then once 2 people have independent reviewers have approved it, it then has an official status. And we're going to more and more see this. And I think it's really important because when research is done, it's so important to share it, but also it's important to ensure that there's complete transparency about the methods that have been used so people are able to draw the right conclusions and interpretations from the data that have been presented. So I think we'll also be, I mentioned we'd be having a webinar on this. I think it's important to think about that. We want openness, but we also need rigor.
Thank you, Susan. Joy, there was a question which in the Slido that came in, which is now dropped off my screen, but was broadly about, I suppose, the commissioning process for hubs such as this, and whether further themes, either in this area or unrelated to this, would be occurring in the future. Is this a way that RC UK are really thinking about their funding model for the future? Thank you.
I think there are probably a couple of elements to that question. So we touched earlier on how other investments that are in sort of a similar, looking at different topics with a behavioural research lens might connect into BR UK. I think there is also this concept of the hub and spoke model where we've commissioned the first spoke with Centre UB, but there could be future spokes that we want to develop as well. And the spokes might develop from a number of different areas. So as BR UK are doing their community engagement, we might identify topics for future spokes. There might be collaborations across ESRC and other UKRI councils which identify topics for spokes. There might be government department liaison which identifies topics. So there are a number of different ways in which we can expand and complement BRUK with new investments in the future.
There were also one or two questions about PhD opportunities. I mean, some of those will have to go through the relevant departments involved. But Joy, again, for you, this is an important part of this, isn't it? That we generate a community of PhD students.
Yes, so Centre UB is going, the CDT Plus is going to be commissioning 3 cohorts of PhD students. The first will be advertised for October 2024 starts, and there'll be more information about those coming out from Centre UB. But I think using BRUK as a communication mechanism as well as ESRC, and there'll also be developing postdoctoral research fellows as well, and this wider diversity of training and capability developing opportunities. So yes, there's more information to come on PhD students through Centre UB later this year.
Yeah, and I should add from our perspective, and Linda might want to add something on this, there are a number of sort of co-funding studentships that we've got from the participants in BRUK. Those opportunities will be, again, advertised in due course. So we hope to add a little bit. It won't be as big as the DTC investment, but to add additional students who will be obviously part of that cohort and take part in all their activities. So hopefully that will work very well. There's a question from an anonymous. How do we plan to evaluate this process during and after the project ends? Now, that was an interesting question that we were discussing before this meeting. You know, what's the long-term outcome that we want to see? And I'm wondering if either Linda or Susan could comment on that. Where will we be in 5 years' time?
So I'll start. I mean, we're not going to solve all of the world's challenges through this grant. There was a comment in the Slido I saw saying this is incredibly ambitious for £10 million. I mean, let's be clear. You know, we're going to do good research and build a community within the resources that we have. But I think this is a really exciting shift. Now, I've been in academia for 30 years, and I've seen in my own areas of research when funders come in and fund a big investment, and this is a big investment for the field, with Centre UB, it actually does change stuff. It means that we collaborate better as a community across the country, that funders, not just the ESRC, but MRC, BBSRC, NERC, others actually think, oh, well, you know, we maybe need a behavioural science bit in our funding calls. They think in an interdisciplinary way. That's not just the UKRI funders. So this is the real promise of that for me. But on the PhD students and postdoctoral studentships, just to add as well, there's also a question, Nick, about posts with us, and I just want to say something on that as well. So we have some in-kind studentships from the universities that will be advertised, as Nick said. I think Manchester is going to be one of the first off the blocks, and there's a few others. So watch out for those. Again, the website is the way to find them. We've already employed some PDRAs, but there will be others across the hub. And again, you'll see them come out through time on the website. So I think, you know, that's another capability scoping element.
Yeah, and Susan.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, we've been just beginning the talking about evaluation. When we think about evaluation, it's both the process, to what extent are our processes matching up to what we've planned, but also the outcome. You know, what difference have we made over the 5 years? So currently, we're just beginning to think about some key indicators and the kind of data that we need to collect as we go along. Again, this is one of the things we'll share with you. It's a joint effort. But the things we want to do, raise the profile of behavioural research in the UK in all sectors, including those who may have never realised that actually the problems they face are essentially problems to do with human behaviour, and that behavioural research would be helpful to them. Those people who are already involved in research, we want to be able to galvanise, to coordinate. You know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. If we can get people from different perspectives or been working on different things coming together, we want to support in terms of capacity building and any other kind of support that will emerge from the capability scoping study. All of these things are measurable. There's always the question of the counterfactuals. To what extent would things have happened had we not been in existence? So not straightforward, but we will definitely be building that in, and we've already begun thinking about it.
Yes, and Anne, you wanted to comment as well?
Yes, just briefly to add that not only, as Linda and Susan have said, will the whole programme be evaluated, be thought through and so on, but that one of the things we have already started doing is ensuring that our participatory methods, our co-production, involves the different elements of the things that we're doing, so that it's not that those who are particularly involved with one thing just get on with it in silos, but that we are all informing ourselves through our webinars. We're producing critical scrutiny of the things that we're doing already, and that's a process that will continue throughout the whole programme. So both at the level of the individual parts of the programme and overall, I think that we will be keeping an eye on quality and scrutiny and all the things that we've said already.
Can I keep you on, Anne, because there's a question about identity actually and of the community, which you might have a comment on. Gale Valle Torangyo says, how do you plan to foster a sense of belonging and engagement amongst behavioural researchers, policymakers, and industry? So how do we build that community?
Yes, and I think that by going for participatory methods, and particularly thinking in work package 4 of the fact that we will be engaging a whole range of people across different sectors of society, I think that will do a great deal to help build both commitment to the project that we have overall, and also shared identities, because it's not just that top down that we're going to be telling people what we're doing, but actually engaging with their ideas, the things that they want and need, and trying to build across different groups a holistic view. So I hope that that will go a great deal of the way towards making people feel that they can really feel part of what we're doing, and that we are taking seriously the things that are serious for them.
Yes, thank you, Anne. And Joe, yes, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add really to what Anne has said, that we'll also be doing that through the network and how we set that up as an inclusive community of practice. We've talked about how we all have different silos, and within those we may use different terms and buzzwords, and sometimes those can help to foster a sort of inside sense of belonging, but they can make it difficult to foster a sense of belonging across and between different groups. So one of the things that we would look to do is to create opportunities for sharing and communicating across those different boundaries, so that people can feel more embedded within this wider community, as well as the smaller ones they may be part of. And also just to add that the survey, which we'll be launching soon, will be a really good opportunity for helping us to understand what are some of those things that form your community, and that you would like to see from the wider community. We'll have opportunities within Network to host events, to do other practical ways that people can engage with one another, both online or potentially in person. So just to say that we really do want to hear from how you would like that community to look as well.
I think also that there have been a lot of comments about how we engage the private sector as well, which is something obviously we need to take very seriously as researchers, and bring those into the loop. There was a sort of a question, several questions have come in about getting too close, a bit too close to government. And I know we touched on this a little bit, but I'm just wondering, what's the role of the critical independent scientist or social scientist sitting here? Obviously, many of us here were involved in pandemic advice, and one had to give advice to the best of one's ability at that point because of the crisis. But there are lots of other issues that are more politically fraught. I think that would be the way that's the sense of the questions that have come in. So I'm wondering if anybody in the team could comment, whether Anne or Linda or Susan could comment on that question. Susan, go on.
Well, I'm happy to start off just by mentioning one of the demonstration projects we have, which really came out of the experience of several of us working in the behavioural part of SAGE, which Angela McLean talked about earlier. And, seeing, as many of us did, maybe the mismatch between, I think advice was presented in over 100 reports, published reports on the website over the couple of years. and what we're seeing in terms of policy and practice on the ground, and thinking about that whole process as to how behavioural advice is given, is received, is engaged with, is translated. So the whole issue is itself a topic of empirical research. So we should be finished this in the next 18 months or so. But that's one contribution, is to really begin to think about the process of it, what's involved in that process, what are the questions, both from policymakers' point of view and from a researcher's point of view, that need to be addressed, so that we learn from the experience rather than, you know, having various ideas and thoughts about it, but not having the data to really help with the understanding.
Yes, and I think Linda wanted to come in as well on this one. Thank you.
If I just say a few words, and then there's one other question I can quickly pick up that's come up. I think there are big differences between what you can do within government and outside of government, but the purpose of this hub is to have partners from lots of different sectors, but a sizable body of independent academics who don't have secondments or joint appointments. And I think those researchers can publish openly, as we'd want to do across the hub, as Susan says, and also challenge government where that's appropriate. It's key that academics do that. They need to do it rigorously. And then the role of scientists within government, obviously, is to provide good policy advice and science for ministers. So those are different roles, and we recognise that and, you know, understand the tensions very well. One other quick question: there was a question about the availability of the findings from the demo projects, Nick, that has come up. So again, to direct colleagues back to the website, but to say that the protocols for the demo projects will be published on Open Science OSF soon. The first one you'll see emerging will be the capability scoping study, and then you'll be able to transparently see the protocols pre-registered for the other demo projects. And those need to be delivered within the first 18 months of the grant. So we would expect some findings from those, as Susan says, in the early part of next year. But if colleagues are interested in, for example, the one on speeding, when that protocol's up, you know, do engage with us, and we're happy to discuss it.
I think Anne had a final comment, and then I will pass over to Linda after. But go on, Anne, just briefly.
Just very quickly, there's a question from Karen Henwood, which asked about whether we're building on past programmes of work that there have been. One of the things that I've been very impressed with so far in this programme is the wealth of experience that people do bring to the understanding of the things that they're doing. So everything that I've been along to so far that colleagues have been doing, and all discussions, are informed by so many other things that they have been part of and led and so on, that I think will stand us in very, very good stead. So, you know, it will be something that I think will genuinely add to knowledge interdisciplinarily, as well as in so many substantive ways.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So it falls to me now just to ask Susan whether she's got any final closing remarks at the end of this really interesting session that we've had this morning. Go on, Susan, do.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to all those who've been putting such interesting and important questions. I realise we've only been able to touch on some of them. So just to reiterate what Linda said is, if you feel they haven't been addressed, please do contact us and we will follow up and address them. Obviously, we've only been able to give headlines here of our thinking and our activity, but I hope you have enough of a sense of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and how importantly you can get involved to be able to go forward with us. You'll be hearing from us shortly with the survey that was mentioned, and I think it's going to be incredibly exciting to see this network develop and have a visual representation of who we all are, where we're working, what are our needs. I personally am really excited to find out what you say. And we're already having discussions about what is behaviour, what is leadership, what is research. We'll share those with you. We want to get a sort of consensus approach to all of this and to our strategy. And, you know, we've mentioned several times we'll be having a webinar series to engage as many of you as possible in these kind of discussions. And do keep your eyes open, but also let us know if there are topics that you would like to see addressed, because this is going to be a very interactive evolving together process. So thank you to the more than 1,200 people who registered. And thank you to all the speakers. I think it's been a really interesting hour and a half. And thank you especially to the technical team who've been amazing both before and during this. And I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you for your engagement. And we hugely look forward to working with you in the future. Goodbye.